Hi, this is Greg Kihlstrom. Welcome to the Agile World podcast, where we discuss customer experience, employee experience, and transformation in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to TEKsystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, a blueprint for creating an experience-led organization, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. I'm excited to introduce part 2 of a special 3-part series about the impacts of the pandemic on organizations' security posture, brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. Today, we're going to talk about how security can be an enabler for business. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome TEKsystems Risk and Security Solution Executive, Kory Patrick. First, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and what you do at TEKsystems?
Hey, Greg. Thanks. My main focus at TEKsystems is spent the last 4 years building out our information security professional services, and recently transitioned into a role that is more customer facing and working on sales enablement with our teams and just really helping our customers, but also our internal customers as well, just really understand, hey, security is really in everything that we do and how it impacts the various solutions that we provide within Tech Global Services.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to talking with you today, and welcome back to the show. You've been you're a repeat guest here, so looking forward to our follow up here. So let's start by talking a little bit about the typical security landscape in most organizations. What do the different layers look like in that typical security landscape?
Well, first of all, Greg, in my experience, there is no typical security organization. It ranges, right? And it ranges from security and just not even being a focal point at all. Some organizations view it as something that's outsourced along with IT, and oftentimes an organization that does that is believing that they're getting more security than they probably are. I've seen organizations that are tens of thousands of employees scattered across the globe, and they have one person, focused on security or thinking about security in the organization. And then, you see groups where you typically have a security org, and it's typically a very small team compared to, information technology or another business unit. And they typically don't have the headcount or the resources that they need to do everything that needs to be done in the organization. And oftentimes they're challenged by the focus of the business or the availability of the business. And oftentimes security is seen as an impediment in an organization or an impediment to, rolling out new products or engaging in new lines of business or going to market. And, how do we, and that's really the big question is, sometimes you see that as a well-oiled machine, but a lot of times organizations struggle with that, right? What is the right level of security? Where should security be injected in an organization? Should it be early and often? Is it a phase gate? And then sometimes you see competing interests, right? And oftentimes that's the value of a partner or a third party and come in and to help look at those things somewhat objectively and prescribe ways to better work together and to better streamline processes.
Yeah. So, you mentioned there is no typical setup, but, what does it look like when they work together well? I mean, how have you seen that? How have you seen that in some of the organizations that you've worked with?
It works well when security understands the business. When the security goals, the security objectives, the security teams, those folks understand the business and they understand how the business functions, how the business operates. And as they go about their work, they're aligning those activities to to the business. Oftentimes you see that big disconnect in that, security orgs understand the infrastructure, they understand the technologies, they understand the things that are in play within the enterprise from a technology perspective, but they don't always understand how the business leverages that technology. And so the better functioning organizations, the better oiled machines per se, are ones where the security folks are in lockstep with the business. They understand the business. They're involved in business decisions, and you see those different units working together more so than an afterthought or a physical desk that someone walks up to. Sometimes we are stuck in some of the adages that you see in movies or those sorts of things, and security today is far from that.
Yeah. Well, then, given that a lot of organizations aren't quite there yet, what tips or recommendations would you have to help them? Like, what are some, not even first steps, because I know that a lot of the organizations you work with aren't necessarily starting from square one, but where are good places to start thinking or evaluating as they're trying to get to that end state of a better relationship there in the security landscape.
What often happens is, and I stated before that, security orgs typically don't have the headcount that they need. They're not going to get the headcount that they need. And so in order to offset that, there's always a focus on tools and technology. And sometimes an organization is either woefully behind or underfunded, and it creates a level of urgency or an emphasis on tooling and not so much, hey, what is our security strategy and what is this tool trying to accomplish? And so what I'm really saying is not neglecting the process piece of this, the strategic aspects of security and what we're trying to do for an organization, and then look at how those tools or how those technologies that are available align to that strategy or goal versus the other way around. And a lot of times, even today, walk into organizations and they'll have 4 or 5 tools that do the same thing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not simple, that's not sustainable, and that investment or ownership, regardless of what budget it comes out of, is taking away from other things that need to be done in the organization.
Yeah. How has the pandemic impacted all of this? The way organizations view the security function, has that has it had much of an impact?
Oh gosh,
I thought I knew the answer to that, but
the understatement of 2020 is the word impact, right? Like, what kind of impact has that had, or the world that we live in today, and the world that we're going to be living in coming out of this too, is all the sorts of things that you think about. And early on in the pandemic, a lot of organizations struggled because what I would call a lack of maturity around identity and access management. I saw organizations put on hiring freezes, not because they didn't need people or because they didn't have the work. It's because they couldn't remotely onboard, provision, deprovision access in the way that they needed to. And so they're just hiring freezes when there was work to be done. I think some of that has alleviated to bit, and organizations have adapted, but part of the reality is a lot of organizations allowed remote work, right? Even ones where you come to the office every day, there's the benefit or the flexibility of maybe working remotely here and there. And so there's the infrastructure that exists, there's the processes that exist, but most organizations didn't build out the infrastructure needed to support 100% remote. And so you saw a lot of good plans and technology and things in place, but not tested or built for the level of, or the load per se that that we're experiencing today. And the other piece I would add there is not just compensating for that, but then realizing security is about control. It's about, hey, what can we wrap our arms around? What can we secure? What can we harden? And there's been such a focus on securing infrastructure, securing from end to end from an organizational standpoint. And then you open up the whole variable of remote work and people working from home, and people who maybe have never worked from home before and have never set those things up and not have the right infrastructure in place. And so now the security organization, the security apparatus of a lot of organizations is now dependent on devices and infrastructure that is beyond their control. And that's
Yeah.
unnerving, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. So I guess on the flip side of this, has there been any positive, whether it's purely positive or just any learnings, anything positive or good to come out of this experience, in the security community?
It's proven that we can do this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the beauty of it is, not just from a security perspective, but even from a business perspective, we can work remotely. Is it optimal? Is it hard on the psyche? Is it, is there an emotional disconnect? Is all those things? Absolutely. Have we introduced an entirely new vernacular here in 2020, right? I mean, um, sorry, I was on mute has just become, somewhat cliche,
Right.
right? And 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 to me that's good, is that we've started to embrace and overcome these things, and now we're thinking bigger, right? We're thinking bigger in the sense that, hey, we can have a remote workforce. We're thinking bigger in the sense that, oh my gosh, we really do have to bring more automation and process around how we provision and deprovision access. We have to bring more thought on how we monitor incidents or logs or security, right? I've had organizations that did all of their security operations in house, and then they realize, well, what if we can't get to our facility? What if we can't get to that? And looking at, hey, we need some partners potentially, to not because we can't to do this work, but just to help us do this work in a time where we've seen unprecedented shutdowns and things changing on a daily basis, to civil unrest, to a lot of different variables here in 2020. And to me, the good that comes out of that is, hey, we're embracing these things as real. We're understanding that these things can happen, and we're being able to quantify some of the impacts of those things. And that ability to quantify the impact of that now carries forward into data-driven business decisions, which is, to me, quite mature. And that's not just from a security perspective, but security is a huge part of
Yeah.
that. So it's good,
Yeah. Yeah.
or I want to say it's good, right? Like, I keep telling myself it's good.
Well, I think it's good to try to find the positive, and there's so many things, that so many negatives, and so many setbacks in other areas. But when you can find something good in spite of all that, I think that's I think we need to do that. So no, agreed. Um, as far as security goes, I mean, do you see security as being a potential competitive advantage? And if so, like, are there organizations that you feel, or even some examples from what you've seen, that have been able to do that and do it successfully?
I look at that as twofold. First, when you think about security, I think of security, privacy, and compliance, right? To me, those are the three kind of focus areas which I broad brush as
Yeah.
security. All of them have similar foundations, but they're different lenses and different ways of looking at how we protect data and how we protect our people. Um, Security and protecting data, to me, that's a community effort, right? Because data moves between organizations, data moves between parties, data moves in and out of your life all the time, right? And to me, that is something that is a community perspective. We're only as secure as our partner or who we share our data with. Um, and that's the human side of it. But when I think of, the question, how can an organization use security as a competitive advantage? That's when I put on that compliance lens, right? And investing in the controls, investing in the processes, and investing in the structure to be compliant with regulatory requirements, absolutely a
Yeah.
competitive advantage. When I think about our solution centers being high trust certified, well, that's a competitive advantage. Not every partner or every competitor has that. When you think about SOC 2 compliance from a third party risk standpoint, that helps a vendor get in faster with an organization versus a vendor that doesn't have that, because they're through more red tape or some of those challenges. It doesn't mean that they're any more or less secure, but investing in that certification, investing in that compliance structure, and achieving that is certainly a competitive advantage for organizations.
Yeah. No, that's great. As far as industries go, are there any that you've seen that have really been advancing more quickly than others in their security posture? Obviously, I'm sure there's some that it started out with some more advancements, but I mean, where do you see the growth in security and really some industries kind of leading the way?
Well, I think that, consistently in all of this is, your financial services, when you talk about advanced technologies and ways of thinking, um, often lead the way, right? And what you see oftentimes, being adopted in the financial services space is maybe a leading indicator to what you'll see in other industries in, 2 to 3 to 5 years, right? Um, that's one way to look at it, right? They're advanced in that technology perspective, but the areas that I see advancing, right, from where they were to where they need to be is, within healthcare, you're seeing a tremendous amount of investment, especially because of ransomware and the reality that a computer or technology generated, hindrance can really impact real lives. And I think when you see the reality of that, I think that, healthcare organizations are beginning to make a tremendous investment in security. And that's definitely an uphill, it's still going to be an uphill climb and something that they're going to be facing for years to come. But it's good to see that.
Yeah.
And then also, even state and local governments is just, there's no organization that's too big or too small to be immune to the threat that's out there. There's no data out there that's unimportant. There's no target out there that an adversary isn't interested in. They're all targets of opportunity. And, while it's terrible to see some of the things that have been happening, it's good to see that organizations are making those efforts to become more secure, or at least better than they were yesterday.
Yeah. So as we look ahead towards 2021, and let's not call it a return to normal. It's maybe a more realistic would be, some things may return to normal, some things may continue on for a while, and some things may never return to what used to be normal. But what should organizations be thinking about related to security as they're planning for the future?
Remote is here to stay. If you relied on your perimeter and a well-defined perimeter as your security posture, that's been eliminated. If you have to focus on identity, you have to focus on credentials, you have to focus on trust and trust issues, and who has your data when and where at any given time. To me, those are the things going forward. Is if an organization does not have a mature identity program, that should be an area of focus.
Yeah, great. Well, Kory, thanks so much for coming back to the show. For those listening, what's the best way to keep up with what you and TEKsystems are doing in the space?
Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, you can always go to TEKsystems.com. That's where the latest and greatest information is. And again, my name's Kory Patrick with a K, and I'm under that handle on LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you want to get in touch with me or ask a question, those are great ways to get a hold of me.
Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Kory Patrick from TEKsystems for joining the show. Learn more about TEKsystems and their perspective on security at teksystems.com/version-next-now. I'm Greg Kihlstrom. Thanks for listening to The Agile World. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by TEKsystems. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, from my website at theagile.world or on Amazon or other retailers. Until next week, stay agile.